Hiya, it's Amanda here from Lolli Lulu Crafts, and today we have the second part of this week's video, which is the project video for our Hero Arts monthly kit. So if you missed the review video of the kit, then do go across to the blog post. You'll find the link in the paragraph below this video, and it will have the other video on that blog post for you as well, plus photos of this finished project. So as you would have seen in the review video of the kit came with dies and stamps that were complimentary, plus a few other items. However, with the dies, I wasn't quite sure exactly what I wanted to do with them, because they were really a cool shape. They were clearly meant to give a 3D effect, not actual physically 3D, but the look of 3D. So I wasn't quite sure how that was going to come out. So I decided that the best thing I could do is I definitely wanted to do it like a silhouette, so the building's like silhouetted against a background. So I thought I would cut all of the pieces out in black cardstock. I used Linda Chapman's black cardstock. I absolutely love it. It's the best black cardstock on the planet as far as I'm concerned, and I literally just ran that through, and you can see I've gone back and forward a couple of times through the Sizzix machine. There's quite a lot of detail on there. The cardstock is a decent weight, so I wanted to be really sure that all the little windows cut. For the sake of going through a couple of times, it just makes it so much simpler. Also, just as a quick aside, one of the dies doesn't have a cut on the bottom of the die. That's deliberate so that you can decide how much of the foreground of that die you want to have. Now, at the time when I cut it, I actually didn't realise that, but it's actually going to work out really, really well for me. So the next thing I wanted to do was cut a mask to use for a moon on my background. So I just took a circle die and a piece of white paper. I measured the circle die according to the size of the sentiment that I wanted to cut, because I wanted to stamp my sentiment inside the moon. At this point, I still really didn't have a idea exactly how it was going to be, this card, but I was kind of just going with the flow and taking it one step at a time and just see how it all came together. Now, at this point, off camera, I had played around with laying my cut pieces out just to see how it would work and roughly what size background piece I would need. So I decided that I wanted to cut it at 5.5 inches square, my background piece. I thought that would work well. I've cut this on some gorgeous Crate & Craft white cardstock. It's one of their new core collection, and it's really, really nice for inking on. It's a really nice smooth cardstock. And what I've decided at this point is that it would work really well to create a lovely kind of sunset background with the moon, etc. Now you can see here, I'm just double checking that the size is going to work, but I thought 5.5 would be quite good as well, because I could use a 6x6 card base. The other reason I wanted to lay the buildings out roughly in position was to position my moon or sun or whatever it is to be in the right place, so that it was kind of tucking behind my buildings, but that also I had space to stamp my sentiment, because I had decided in my mind's eye that I would like to stamp the sentiment into the actual white space that I was going to leave behind by using this mask. I just thought it would look quite effective. So now it's time to create our background, and I decided for this that I thought I would use my Distress Oxides. I know perhaps normally for this you might use just normal Distress inks, but I just love Distress Oxides. So I tested a few different colours and combinations, and I decided in the end on 3 colours: Blueprint Sketch, Wilted Violet and Seedless Preserves. And I just liked how it started from that kind of berry kind of tone to purple, and then to a lovely dark rich blue, and I felt if I worked hard enough at the blend it should work really well. So I'm using my little smoothies, or eggs as I like to call them, and I'm starting off at the bottom of my card. My moon is up on the top right, well, kind of top left actually, but it will be right when it's the right way round. I've twisted my card around because I find it easier to work with the card on the side. And then I've started off with quite a relatively light coating of the Seedless Preserves, and now I'm moving in with the Wilted Violet, and I'm just starting off my cardstock and just circular movements going onto the card. You'll see at the moment I haven't quite blended them in or anything. I'm just laying down that colour, and now I'm starting to move that colour over the seedless preserves, and now I'm going back to the seedless preserves. I'm deliberately using 3 different smoothies because I don't want to mush the colours on the actual smoothie, but also it makes it easier for blending purposes because I can pick up the smoothie and really use each one and it'll have its colour on it and start to blend it. On the camera, the line between the 2 colours is actually much more obvious than in person, and it was when I looked up on the little camera screen I could see that it wasn't quite as blended as I would want it to be. But this is the first layer almost, really. At this point you're just kind of laying down the colour. You're not at this point trying to get everything perfect. You're going to end up with a lot more colour on there. You just want to keep blending it out, keep adding the colour, starting off your cardstock. I put down that heat resistant matte because it's really smooth, so it made it very easy to start my circular movement off the card because it was just gliding across that mat, and so it made it a lot easier. Also, it kept a lot of the ink on the mat, so I could sometimes sort of grab a little bit from the mat as well if I didn't want to dob it straight into the ink pad again. So I'm just working on that line there, just trying to really blend that through. And you just keep adding the colours and keep blending the lines, so you're just putting a little bit of one colour into the second colour and vice versa till the line is really not obvious anymore. When you're coming up near where your mask is, do be careful. Usually you want to come from the mask back onto the card, because if you work where you're pushing your circles up into your mask, there's a chance that you'll lift the edge of that mask and actually put ink underneath. I am at this point kind of holding it down, so I'm just being careful, and I'm only really just touching the edge of that mask as well. You'll see here I'm really dragging quite a lot of that seedless wilted violet into the seedless preserves, pulling it quite a long way down, because the wilted violet was kind of the colour that was in my head to be the main one. You'll see also I've not left a lot of room for the blueprint sketch, the lovely blue colour, again because I don't want a lot of that. It doesn't need it. It depends on how dark you wanted to go. I felt that was quite a strong colour. I didn't want to have that just on its own, too much of it. I felt that would be too overpowering. You'll see here, by the way, look, you see I'm just coming off. I was just coming off the mask of the moon, or I'm not sure if it's a moon or a sun, to be honest, but anyway, that round thing in the sky, I was coming off it at that point just to get some of the colour around the edge of the I'm going to call it a moon because that's what I keep calling it in my head. And then I'm just again doing exactly the same as I did with the bottom part, 2 colours, and I'm blending that colour through into the wilted violet below. And again, just adding that, making sure it's even on both sides of my moon so it goes across straight. It's very easy to not do that. And now I've just realised, I don't know if you can just see, it was really obvious in life. There are actually fingerprints all over my ink. It's basically where I'm holding it, it was lifting the ink off. I didn't really appreciate just how wet the Distress Oxide stayed, and it's very chalky, so it really kind of lifted up. The good thing was that very easily, with just a bit of elbow grease, I was able to reblend it and get those fingerprints to go completely. It doesn't look it at this point, but it actually will later. You'll see it will go completely. Again, I'm still adding those layers. I'm not doing like going in, putting exactly the right amount on in one go. I'm trying to just build the colour up slowly. That way you'll get the blend. If you try and do like exactly the right amount of depth of colour or the right amount of colour all in one go, you're not going to get that blend. You're just going to get harsh lines. So by doing it this way, I'm just really just adding it and layering it, and eventually you'll just get this piece of card that really just looks like it came that colour. It's amazing. And there I'm just working again. again adding another layer at the bottom there. You can see it's just adding depth to the colour, and it's so nice, and it's really blending that. And you'll also notice that what I'm doing now is I'm putting my fingers over the mask, and you can see here I'm taking the wilted violet right up over that blue, and that's kind of the colour I feel that's like the other two are much more to the outside. The wilted violet is more the main colour. However, I've dragged the seedless preserves in particular so far up into the wilted violet that it sort of still has that tone, that more berry tone in the bottom half of that more purple of the wilted violet. So, and then the same with the blue. And now I'm with the blue, I'm just adding again more layers. I hadn't done so much on the top there, so I'm adding more layers, but I decided that I felt that the blue just straight on its own, even just on the very edge at the top there, was just a little bit too blue. So I've taken that wilted violet all the way up, and I didn't add any more colour to my little smoothie. I literally just took what was on there and just dragged it up over the blue. And I'm sorry if sort of watching this in real time is a little bit boring for those of you that kind of do this all the time, but I felt that on a lot of these videos when you watch this, people tend to jump from the beginning. They show you a little bit, and I've done it too, and they show you a little bit and then they jump to the end when it's done. And I know as when I was new to crafting, I really didn't quite know how people got it to blend out so well, so I thought this time I would show it in full and in real time. So please forgive me if that's something that you know really well, and I hope for those of you that don't know it well and are perhaps beginners to it found that useful. So I decided on the water section, there was I did 2 cuts of it, and I did the second cut, I cut in half so that it would go across the bottom. You'll see how it fits in a minute. You'll see why it needs to be wider. But I did feel that it needed like a moonlight on the water. So I've taken this white Hero Arts that I had in the last kit. I can't think, it's Reactive, I think it's called. But anyway, sea salt. And I just was dabbing it on with the smoothie, but it just wasn't doing enough. So in the end, I got a bit bored, and I thought that it would actually be quite nice if it was almost patchy and dotty, because it would look like the moonlight was kind of catching certain parts of the water in the movement of it in a more than others. And you'll see what I'm trying to do is a kind of V, so that it's coming down from widest to the narrow point. You'll also notice that the 2 bits at the bottom are slightly different depths, and that will be corrected, but it wasn't important at this point. I just wanted to get my ink on so that it would start drying, and then I could cut it all to size once I knew exactly what that size was. So while that was drying, I decided to stamp the sentiment on my moon. I just peeled off the mask, and then I got my stamp platform out, and I positioned the buildings on that were affecting the moon roughly in position, and then positioned my stamp accordingly so that it obviously wasn't going to be covered by the buildings. And then I picked it up and stamped it using the gorgeous VersaFine Onyx Black. It's really great for sentiments, I think. And I just stamped that down, gave it a lightish press. You don't want to go too mad because you don't want to squish the lettering so that it's all smushy. And then it just came out beautiful. I think that looked really nice in the moon there. I thought that worked really well. I next decided that on the stamp set there was some little clouds and also some little flying birds, so I decided that I would add those in. I felt that would be a nice background, and I used the onyx back for that as well. So now we're into the construction of the card itself. So first thing I need to do is add my background to my card base, and I've got a pre-scored 6x6 card base here, and I'm just using some tape pen to attach that to the front of it. Now to the first layer of our buildings, I've just used some Cosmic Shimmer glue for that, and I'm just sticking it flat onto the card. It was just pure coincidence that this was the actual right width that I needed for this. It didn't really matter too much because I was going to be adding some black on the sides anyway, and you'll see I just had roughly torn the edges there, and it wasn't the most important thing. So next after that, that, I want to add my water, and this is where I need to just adjust the size of those pieces. I think in hindsight this would have been a lot simpler if I had stuck the water to my piece, the black buildings there that I just put down, cut off the excess, then stuck the whole thing down, whereas now I've kind of got to do it by eye and hope that it works. So we're just going to use the Cosmic Shimmer again. When I've got delicate sort of detailed pieces like this, what I tend to do is put some on a piece of scratch paper and then just, well, dunk my piece of card into that glue. What this means is, on the whole, unless you've got a ton of glue on your piece of paper, it doesn't come through the holes, but it does coat all those detailed elements. So it's a great way of doing it. I know I've seen some people do it on the back of their hand. Personally, wouldn't recommend that, because you don't know if after time you'll get some sort of allergy to the glue. It's just not worth it, because if you do get an allergy, you're really stuffed, because you won't be able to use it ever again. So it's not really worth that. And then all I'm going to do is cut the two other pieces to size and then stick those down with the Cosmic Shimmer glue as well. So the next thing we want to put down is the gondola, and for this I want it raised up slightly. So for this I'm using my pin flare glue gel, and I'm using the fine tip syringe because there's obviously quite a lot of detail to this. Now I haven't stuck the other buildings down, I've just put them roughly in place so that I know where to position my little gondola in relation to the bridge. Now again, using my pin flare glue gel and that fine tip syringe, I've added some of the glue gel to the back of this building. I've put it so that it's relatively high, not like super high. You could of course use foam tape, but I found with such detailed pieces it's so much easier to use the glue gel. The key when you're using glue gel on something as detailed as this is, one, positioning it correctly in the first place. So using that fine tip is really important, and then not squishing it down too hard once you get it in place, because you can put quite a thin, tall height of glue gel. The only time it goes wrong and it starts squishing out is when you push it down hard. What you want to do is just give it a light tap so that it touches the surface of the card or whatever it is that you're sticking it to, but not so hard that it really alters the shape that you've created, to give it that height and also to be in position so that it's not showing through those little windows, etc. So next I'm adding the little bridge, and if you notice that actually it fits perfectly. That's one of the things I was trying to measure, that it fits perfectly between those two buildings. Now there are other ways of positioning it so that the buildings kind of overlap the edges of the bridge, and you've kind of got the little lamppost kind of at the side of the little bridge, but I wanted it to be as wide as possible so that the buildings at the back show through really prettily as well. So the last thing I want to add is the washing line between the two buildings at the top. You could leave that if you prefer, because we had the background with the clouds and everything, but I just wanted to really make use of pretty much everything that was in the kit, just to show you how effective it could look. And again, the distance that was between the two buildings, by doing it how I've done it here, will just reach across an angle with the washing line. It's got enough so that if you wanted them close together, the ends are sort of quite a lot of line, relatively speaking, so you have got the room to bring the buildings in a bit without it sort of interfering with the actual washing. So they've kind of thought of everything, because with the line going out wider, it doesn't look wrong by having it with the extra line, but it does give you that movement to be able to come in closer if you wanted to as well. With the front being complete, I felt that the final touch was to add something to the inside, and I just wanted to keep it quite simple. So I found a matching piece of cardstock, or complementary, it wasn't deliberately matching, piece of cardstock to the colour of the wilted violet, I guess the main colour on the front. I cut it to 5 3/4 square, and then just using my tape pen stuck it to the inside, and it was a perfect match. It was really good. And then you can just see there from the top just the little dimension that we've got. So it's not like super high, but it just gives some really nice dimension. That is it. That is the card this month's monthly Hero Arts kit. I really enjoyed this because I didn't really know where I was going to go with it. I really wasn't quite sure how the dies were going to work together, so it was kind of really a step by step and just seeing how things went together. I really liked how the background turned out with the Distress Oxides. Just a point on that, by the way, I forgot to mention, was that I did, after I took the Moon's mask off, I did dry my background using a heat gun because I was concerned that I would keep putting finger marks on it. You could of course let that dry naturally, but I just didn't have the patience or the time, so I just used a heat gun and it worked out fine, and it seemed to not then create any more sort of finger marks. Okay, so that is it for this week. Don't forget to go on across to the blog post to see the other video, of course, and also all the photos of this finished card. I think you'll get a really good look at the dimension and the effect of that, much more so than you will here on the video. Plus, of course, there'll be links to all the products used. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.
I
Bye.
put on the charm with a dance that made you swoon. You were like a howling wolf calling to the moon. I'm a gypsy lover, so I had to set you free. You were in my arms because of trickery. As I sang for you, my melody would pull you in. I was like a mermaid hoping you would take a swim. Was it real? I still feel the way you felt. Was it true? Or were you just under